It doesn't mean there's aliens above your head right now or anything like that, but there are things that pilots are seeing that just don't fit any of their context or understanding, and that's
Right.
what we need to figure out.
There have been over 500 reported UFO sightings in the US since 2004, and for a long time, all that was good for was getting you called a conspiracy theorist. Then in 2020, the US went and told the world that UFOs might be kinda sorta real. I mean, by definition, they're real, but they become a little bit more real when the Department of Defense admits that some 171 unexplainable sightings display unusual flight characteristics. They also recently updated the word UFO to UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, steering away from the idea that it's just one solid thing and stretching the definition to mean just about anything. Welcome to Technality. I'm Alex, and this is the story about how one Navy pilot is trying to protect all of us from those 171 unexplainable sightings.
That turn out to be some type of foreign surveillance, and we need to treat that as, some type of security threat, or we don't know what it is, and it deserves our scientific curiosity at that point to figure it out.
For a long time, if you came out and told people that you saw a UFO, or I guess a UAP, you would be labeled everything from a conspiracy theorist to straight up crazy. People who saw things started keeping it to themselves because why risk humiliation? But in 2020, everything changed. 3 videos released by the Pentagon captured by naval aviators revealed unidentifiable objects in the sky rotating against the wind. It defied logic. Surprisingly though, these clips didn't do nearly as good a job at getting people's attention as the Chinese did, with a series of spy balloons that were spotted and shot down above the United States. Unexplainable objects and foreign spy tech went from being sci-fi to a part of everyday life seemingly overnight. Now, whether you believe in aliens or not is completely besides the point, because something being in the sky when it shouldn't be can cause a lot of problems. In fact, back in 2016, 2 Porter airline crew members were injured when a plane dove to avoid hitting an object that appeared to be solid, shaped like an upright donut or inner tube. I managed to sit down with the one guy who was trying his hardest to find out what the hell is going on out there. Ryan Graves joined the Navy in 2009 and underwent years of rigorous training as a pilot, trained to be an expert observer. But something happened in 2014 that led him to being the first active duty pilot to publicly disclose regular sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena. All right, Ryan, take me back to 2014. Take me back to what happened that day.
We had just got back from deployment. We're operating in Afghanistan, and we came back and we started to upgrade some of the systems in our jet. We would now see objects on our radar that we weren't seeing just hours before. And at first, we thought these were perhaps radar glitches in the system due to the upgrade. But eventually, we happened by chance to get close enough to these objects where our other sensor systems on the jet automatically look over and track those things, and we would get within range. And some of these were visual sensors. And so we started seeing visual and infrared energy coming from these points in the sky. So we were like, okay, these are physical objects now that we have to respect. And that's when they became a potential safety issue for us. It was still somewhat nebulous and uncertain at this point, but we had to respect them as a potential concern. But eventually, 2 aircraft from my squadron were flying out to the working areas, which start just 10 miles off the coast. And they were in a standard formation as they entered the area, and one of these objects went right between the 2 aircraft, about 50 feet from the lead. And that's well within our 500-foot safety bubble. And he described the object as simply a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere. And, he had no further conclusion of what that was, but that's what they saw. And they ended up canceling the flight, and they had to then process that as a hazard report through our aviation safety reporting system, because it was within our safety bubble. We really had no choice at this point other than to start to document these issues.
Okay, and what was everyone's initial impression? Like, what did the government think and the military think it was at first?
At first, radar glitches. Then we thought it was some type of classified drone program that we weren't read into. But over time, that theory just simply went away for a number of reasons. One of the reasons are we would see these objects perform behaviors that seemed relatively benign for a majority of the observations. So what that means is, hey, these things are just kind of moving in a particularly organic type movement versus like an autopilot type behavior. But they'd be doing that across altitudes and no consideration for the wind. And they'd be doing these at 0.6 or 0.8 Mach, which are quite quick. They would stay completely stationary for very long periods of time, much like trying to stay stationary in the ocean. You need to constantly be countering that to make that happen. You're always going with the flow. So all these things, when you start to look at them, you realize like we can't do that for that long. And we also can then travel at 0.6 to 0.8 Mach after doing that for that long. It's very easy to look at one particular set of behaviors, such as it being stationary, and say, well, that's clearly a balloon. It's like, okay, that's great. But if you kind of zoom out temporally and you look how that balloon just, started traveling at 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, clearly you have to consider that information when you're validating whether you think it's a balloon or not. So that's what, people tend to look at one particular chunk of the issue and assign, something they recognize to that particular set. Unfortunately, when we have these public hearings and whatnot, what do we see? We have a very tight zoomed in image. I think a bit paradoxically, if we were to zoom out a bit more, we'd probably gain more information.
It feels like this kind of minimizing of a situation is a very human reaction to something that we don't fully understand.
Unfortunately, the result of doing that in this particular case is us living with the aviation safety risk that has gone unmitigated both in the defense industry and the military, but also in the commercial sector as well. So
Yep.
we've seen this move in the right direction, such as the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023, that enabled defense contractors, military contractors, and others to be able to report and whistleblow on reports that may not have been reported legally, but are classified.
And all of this ties into your new organization, Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Americans for Safe Aerospace is an issue-focused advocacy group where we're focused on really just making sure that as Americans we understand what's above our heads. Because when we don't know, what's going to happen is that's going to fall into two categories. It's going to turn out to be some type of foreign surveillance, and we need to treat that as some type of security threat, or we don't know what it is, and it deserves our scientific curiosity at that point to figure it out. And we've seen just recently with the shootdowns over North America just how serious of an issue this is when we do have unidentified objects in our airspace. So, and that's a point we've been pushing for a while, because I got involved in this topic as a former F-18 pilot, where we were observing objects that we couldn't identify, couldn't explain, and no one else could either. And there really was just no mechanism for us to report or to resolve these issues. And that's why I essentially went public and started to speak about this back in 2018, 2019, when I was getting out of the Navy.
Okay, for my own curiosity, what do you think this is? Like when you go to bed at night, it's got to be in the back of your head.
I think about them, right? I think about the potential ET hypothesis. I think about the fact that perhaps these are a technology that I don't recognize from Iran, potentially, that could be penetrating our airspace. I think about, all the other fun theories that are less, immediately scientific provable, time travel, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, we do know that we have tools that can observe these objects, right? And that's a relatively unique situation to find ourselves in, that we are seeing these objects in a repeatable manner with tools that are at least known about publicly. It's not some incredibly classified system, although, yes, you can't look at the hard data. So I think we do have a real way to move this forward. But to directly answer your question, I don't think it's going to be one thing. I think it's going to be a little bit of many different things. And some of that is going to be the Chinese balloons, right? Some of that is going to be the other things that we don't know that we actually shoot down. But there is a category, and it's big enough, of just strange stuff that we don't know what it is, that deserves our attention and our respect, both from a national security perspective and from an aviation safety and scientific perspective.
Right. Ryan, I really appreciate you taking the time, man. Take care. This could be the tip of the iceberg as the ASA and organizations like it start looking into things that we don't fully understand. The next few years could lead to some very weird, very interesting discoveries. That's it for this episode of Technality. I'm Alex, and I'll see you in the future.